Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Vento Aureo. This might be coming really quite late because I'm already recording this on Saturday instead of Friday, so I'm already a day behind on that level. And more than that, I don't have the time to immediately go on and edit this because I've got a bunch of assignments and stuff to do. And then on top of that, I might get copyrighted again because I'm not mirroring the footage this time. And instead, as you're seeing on screen right now, I'm doing something a little bit unique. Obviously, the sacrifice here is that you won't be able to see my mouse movements as clearly as you did in the first two episodes, but in order to counter that, what I've got is this special program that basically allows me to draw on screen. Hang on, you won't be able to see that. There you go. See, look at this. Whoa, fun times. And basically, I'll be using that to point out little animation details. Like, for example, there will be a little soccer ball coming in from this angle and blocking the sun from here. I've been looking at this pretty much frame by frame, and a lot of you guys have been really quite excited by that, which I'm happy to see, you know, that people aren't just like, oh my god, how could you talk about the opening for 40 minutes straight? People are actually like, you're so passionate about this, and I love to see that. And so yeah, for you guys, for the real JoJo fanatics out there, this series will be for you. Sadly though, that being said, I don't actually have much to say about this episode. And granted, yes, I did say that about the last episode, but the last episode had the opening and the ending to talk about as well, so that really drags it out. But this one, apart from very fine details, I don't really think I have much to say at all. But of course, you know, the fine details are seemingly what you guys are excited about, so I'm not too scared on that count. We've got episode 3, which is the episode where Polpo comes in. I believe this one's called The Gangster Behind the Wall. We get to see Polpo turning from a bed into this giant monster of a human being. If you've read Harry Potter 6 or you've watched the movie, then obviously there's a lot of parallels to Horace Slughorn turning from furniture into, well, his normal self. Is that a JoJo reference? Ooh, I wonder. Probably not. Like I already said, it's not that I have a lot to say, but I probably will end up saying a lot just because I'm pretty bad at having like a limiter to the stuff I say. All right, so let's get into the episode. Immediately, we get into this little thing here where the soccer ball does come in and it does block out the sun. Is this symbolism, my dudes? I wonder. Later on in the manga, they mentioned that the ladybug, which is Giorno's kind of like symbolic animal, heraldic animal, would be maybe an appropriate phrase. The ladybug he mentions is the beetle of the sun, and of course when we get to that point in the anime, I'll point it out then as well. Obviously the other symbol with the sun is the phrase buongiorno, which means good morning, I think. Giorno means day, or else morning, or anyway, the point is it's tied to the image of the sun, right? That's another thing that ties Giorno to the sun. There's the idea that nothing really comes easily for Giorno at this point, or ever throughout Vento Aureo, really. So, you know, something as innocent as a soccer ball can still maybe pose a threat to Giorno. Is that maybe the symbol we're getting? This entire episode is, of course, him trying to resolve this conflict, even though, you know, it's overshadowing him. And of course, the idea of shadows is really quite profound in terms of how it influences the Black Sabbath fight. So maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I feel like, you know, this is just such a weirdly placed shot. Right at the start of the episode, they make it really like this big profound thing, even though it really wasn't in the manga. So why not read into it is essentially what I'm saying. Then we get this shot where the kids are all actually quite really well animated. You know, they're all flitting about quite naturally. But in the background, you can see Bruno and Giorno are kind of looking a bit stilted and a bit out of place. Especially if you really zoom into Bruno's face, it doesn't really seem quite right. And in fact, this is the first episode, I would say, where Vento Aureo's animation quality has really dipped for the worse. If you compare that to part 4, I would say that it took at least 4 or 5 episodes for it to get as bad as it has with Vento Aureo. And again, you know, I was holding my hopes up that it wouldn't get this bad this quickly, but I'd rather that they have really terrible looking episodes at the very start, so that they can, you know, when they get later on in the episodes, all the budget isn't like front loaded to like the very first few episodes. Like it was with part 4. I prefer that the really important episodes where we are introduced to Bruno's gang, for example, when the gang starts like dancing on the boat as they make their way to Capri, all these little moments, those are the episodes that I really want them to focus on. And honestly, for a distant shot in Bucciarati in an episode that is more or less just kind of like a setup to the really important parts of the story where Giorno eventually joins Passione and becomes like this really important member of Bruno's gang, and really guides Bruno on his journey of treachery against the boss. In the scope of all that, this episode is actually quite a small moment for Giorno. So I can totally appreciate them going low budget on this particular episode. That being said, you know, the close-ups on this episode are still marvelous to witness. So it's not like they've totally sacrificed quality. Let's put it like that. Hang on, I'm still getting used to this tool. It's a very cool tool, and you know, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it, but there might be some clumsy edits. Let's put it like that. There's also one particular frame in the manga that I really, really like, and I don't think they included. Do you know what that is? I think that's actually oh shit, that was me being clumsy again. I'm pretty sure that little moment was animation practice that David Production got from animating Captain Tsubasa. Giorno in this particular episode looks frighteningly like Jonathan. I'm not sure why. And in fact, this whole episode has this kind of part 1-esque vibe. You know, it's got like pretty low animation quality. It's a bit more like stilted, and you can really like count the frames as they come. And something about this particular design, I don't know, maybe it's like the wide shoulders or like the jaw or something. Something just about it just feels part 1-esque. And as we go through the episode, you'll notice that I'll be saying a lot of that. Like, this is a very part 1-esque moment, and this feels a lot like it came from the first season and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know. It was just a weird episode in that way. Maybe they got someone who worked on the first season to work on this episode. I'm not sure. This is actually kind of interesting, but I'll talk about it later. Like, this is one of those moments where if we were back in the first episode, we'd be seeing a lot more animation of Bruno. You know, like, it wouldn't just be him flapping his lips up and down, it would actually be a bit more like aggressive, and we'd see him moving a lot more. Bruno's really static here. Giorno isn't like even reacting in any way, which is, it feels like a marked drop in quality from episode 1. But like I said, you know, it's kind of expected that an anime being like a cheap production overall can't maintain the quality that David Production obviously wanted to maintain as they introduced in episode 1. See, like, that's a very minute animation instead of like a full head turn, for instance, which is maybe what we would have seen in episode 1, like his entire body maybe even, or at least from like the neck up, like swiveling to better look at Bruno, and maybe Bruno like lifting his head up so he can better make eye contact with Giorno. That's the kind of stuff that we would have probably seen in episode 1, but we're not seeing it all here. And again, you know, like, all Bruno's really doing here is lip flapping, and it's not as satisfying as seeing his entire face like contort into completely different expressions as we saw in the part 1, and something that I was praising part 1 very highly for, and we never actually quite got. This is an interesting frame because you can really see Bruno's face in the stone there, with like the hair and the eye here and his arm like coming up like this. I have a lot to say about the opening actually, but I'll probably make an entirely separate video about that because, like I said, I don't want this video to bloat up entirely. And in any case, I've spotted a lot more things, I've read a lot more things, I've even watched a couple of other videos which I've never done for JoJo. I don't know, like, I go on YouTube and I just find other things that are much more exciting to watch than videos of JoJo, of which I already have an opinion, and of which I already have a lot of knowledge. I don't need other people to explain to me how, like, Sticky Fingers works if I already have a really good understanding of how Sticky Fingers works. So yeah, anyway, I'll skip the opening because you'll probably see another video coming this week. Yeah, see you guys in a minute and a half. いつか輝ける命の限り神にも逆らい戦い続ける複数の魂たちよ Fighting gold! Yeah, if you don't have the lyrics to the opening entirely memorized at this point, then you're not a real JoJo fan! Oh, what are you gonna say about that? Hashtag gatekeeping. These frames are particularly interesting just because they're so not JoJo-like. Like, they just kind of look like generic anime shots. So Like this is the kind of stuff you'd probably see in like a PA Works show actually. I'm specifically thinking of Eccentric Family. Like if you put the Eccentric Family soundtrack over this, I would actually believe it's from that show, because like these flat colors, these, you know, like not particularly JoJo-esque faces, like this feels very much like it's just from some generic post-2010s digital anime. Of course there's this beautifully realized Naples street in the background, but I mean, like, you look at Eccentric Family and it's beautifully realized Kyoto streets, and how's that? It's not that much different from what you see here. It's just a different skin on top of the building. So I'm not really sure what point I'm trying to make other than this isn't particularly JoJo. Something about this specific shot and the way like this, I was gonna say creature, no. Something about the way this woman is drawn is almost like Lisa-esque. It's probably like the lines on her face, right? Like that's very part one. Especially these lips, like the way these lips are shaded is very, very part one. And the way like this guy's neck is shaded and the beard that comes in reminds me way too much of Joseph from part 3. So this is like a very part 3 aesthetic, and I'm not really sure where they're getting these, because, you know, like I've never really thought that the part 5 style had very much anything in common with part 1 or part 3, other than, well, they use a lot of lines, but that's just Araki's aesthetic, right? Like using a lot of lines. So again, like it makes you wonder whether they brought back someone who, you know, spent a lot of time working on part 1, and that's why you get all these little similarities. There's something really nostalgic about these designs as well. I mean, parts 1 and 2 in anime came out in 2012, which is 6 years ago now, so I think nostalgia is a pretty good word for that actually, because I was young. Let's put it like that. I was young when JoJo Season 1 came out. And there's just something instantly recognizable about this particular face that I can immediately attribute to part 1 and season 1. I like this little choice that they showed Bruno and Giorno just like walking through the town together. And especially like the little editing that they do here, where they just show like people essentially, and they're not even doing much. Like, well, they're literally not animated, so they're not doing anything at all. But just in terms of what the frame shows, I mean, there are just two people talking and this one guy looking at a truck. But because we're associating all of these images to Passione, there's this undertone to every single one, that there's something sinister going on behind every single one of these. And, you know, that's a fantastic choice, because that's essentially what gangs are. You know, they're the dark secret to society, right? Like, they operate not only beneath the law, but in simpatico with the law, like with the legal law, and then they have their own little moral code. And that's another thing that I'll be talking about later in the week on a separate video, when I want to talk about Bruno's morality and if he's a good person or not. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, no, just the way they just the way they paint that morality in such a subdued way is really, really interesting, I think. I keep forgetting to escape the paint mode. This is really cool. Like, I pause at the worst moments, I swear. You can see like the shadows slowly darkening around them, and that's just, a lot of anime have started doing these, but I like noticing every single time that they do it. And this is my chance to really point it out, especially when it's happening in JoJo. Just the way like it darkens as they walk in, presumably into some kind of not cavern, like underpass, I suppose. Really cool touch. Again, the graffiti. There was a use of graffiti in part 4 that I found really just kind of dull and uninteresting. It's in episode 4 or 5. It's the one where Koichi like runs over the fake cat. And Tamami Kobayashi, the user of the lock, is like, oh, you gotta pay me back because you just killed my cat. And it turns out he didn't kill any cats at all. And it was just a setup by Tamami. And in that episode, there's just like a bunch of graffiti on the ground. And it's really just like an explosion of color. And there's no real reason why it's there. Whereas here, there is an extremely important reason. Well, I say extremely important. As extremely important as something in the background that only shows up for like a few seconds of an episode would be. And again, it's to show that undertone of, I wouldn't say criminality, you know, because like how much do you really consider street art to be criminality, right? Like I don't know, a lot of people have very strong opinions about graffiti and such, but you know, at least this is pretty, let's say that much. And you know, there's still this undertone of civil unrest, right? Like all is not well and proper in the otherwise beautiful town of Naples. Like there is place for vandals to vandalize, to upset our understanding of a public space, and to upset the morality of Naples as we see it at a glance. Which, you know, they actually did bring attention to in like that very first anime original scene back in episode 1. Like, we did talk about that divide between, you know, the city of Naples isn't exactly how it seems. There are corrupt cops. There are people doing drugs in alleyways. And here again, they're kind of reinforcing that by showing, even though they are walking through a public space there, it's not entirely governed and it's not clean. You could counter that and say, well, it's still ordered, right? Like, it's still artistic. There's still some integrity to the vandalization. And you could say, well, that symbolizes the mob. Just as the mob is also a criminal organization, it still abides by its own laws, and you can break those laws. And if you break those laws, then you suffer the consequences. Much like how Giorno's, you know, like idol, the one he saved by growing the grass tall that we saw in episode 2, much like how he abided by the laws of the gang and he had to kill someone because he wanted to abide by them. Much like how Bucciarati actually had to abide the laws of the gang even though he actually hates the boss. Bruno can't actually rebel against the boss because that would be going against that moral code, even though it applies to criminals, right? Like, and so Bruno still holds stock by that moral code because it's the only thing that really applies to him. And similarly, even though these people are just vandalizing the world around them and disregarding what the common rules of behavior are, let's put it like that. Even though they are flaunting the rules, they're still living by their own rules and they're creating some, you know, fancy fucking art. From that distinction between lawfulness and self-imposed morality, if you will. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I've talked a little bit too much about this. And in fact, like I said, I will have a full video talking about Bruno's morality. And if, as Giorno says, Bruno really is a good person, and I don't know how long that video will be, but it'll probably, knowing how talkative I am, it'll probably end up being like 2 or 3 hours. This is a brilliant. I'm usually not that happy with, you know, very flat aesthetics, even if it is like gradiated, and you'll have noticed that I've always been very excited about how rich the shading is. So when I first saw this, I was like, this is an interesting aesthetic, but it doesn't really fit in with what Vento Aureo generally looks like, even all the way back to the key visuals, right? Like, all of it was very starkly shaded. But then we get the transition, if you will, the animated transition of him coming out of the underpass, and you get this wonderful little shadow play and work of animation to emphasize the light being shone on him, and it just looks brilliant. Again, the marriage between CG techniques and traditional hand-drawn animation. That's one of the few moments where, well, first of all, two things happened. You saw the really choppy animation as Bruno moved his arm. That would have been really quite smooth in the first episode, for example. But also, that was a very Part 1-esque aesthetic. I don't know, something about the broad shoulders, something about the way the face is drawn, something about this chin, probably. This is a very Part 1-esque chin. Like, I see Jonathan and Joseph in this. I don't know, it's just something about this is triggering my nostalgia, and I don't know what it is. And I wonder if anyone else felt that as well. And this too, like, door, right? Like, just the way the sound effects pops up. Very, very season 1-esque. Also, you see the lack of depth in the clothing here, and this is very much not the Part 5 ideal that we witnessed in episode 1. And I don't want to keep harping on about this because it just happens throughout the episode, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, like, the facial animation is very stiff compared to what we got in episode 1 and what I was praising episode 1 so highly for. So it's a letdown, but I'm not offended by it, because I feel like a lot of people, you know, inherently get angry that, oh my god, this is not the standard we expected from Part 5 after what we got from episode 1. And it's like, calm down. Right? Like, this is what the majority of anime looks like. It still looks better because look at these beautiful blacks going on here. And just, well, all over his face, really, and even on Giorno. It's just, you know, to sustain what we got for episode 1 would have been a Herculean task, and it would have taken the budget of roughly a small country to accomplish. But I still would have liked to have seen the hypothetical Part 5 anime that actually did all the crazy stuff that episode 1 did for 38 other episodes. and I guess we're not getting it, and that is a shame. Giorno looks really thick here, and again, just more part 1 flashbacks. This is my favorite frame, absolutely. This, I think, is the start of something that I won't keep mentioning it like I have with the part 1 business, like the art style of part 1 and how it keeps triggering my nostalgia. I'll just point it out this once, and I'll let you suffer through it, if you will. Look at Giorno's black eyes. Can you guys see that? Probably not, especially not after I've covered it with this thick highlight. No, that just made it worse. No. Well, anyway, you get the idea. Look at those black eyes around Giorno. And tell me that that's a lot worse than what we got for episode 2. Because in episode 2, I was actually very impressed by how much they managed to keep Araki's aesthetic of those black eyes, right? And like the eyes are entirely shaded black, but it still felt so natural, even to see it from a distance. And here they've completely failed. And it reminds me a little bit too much of Kira when his Saint Gentleman's bag gets stolen, and he's looking around and he's like, "Where is it?" And he sees the dog like biting on it, and he's like, "Oh no!" It looked terrible. This looks terrible. I won't mention it again, but it will just be throughout the episode, and that's the one thing that I'm really offended by, I'd say, because if it looks this bad, just don't draw the eyes. Like, what's so difficult about that? Anyway, I'm gonna say my most controversial statement to date. This lady is hotter than Trish. Fight me, IRL. Come at me. I don't care. I will defend this statement to the day I die. I find her to cut a much more attractive figure than Trish. Yeah, just minor character things. Dem eyebrows. 10 out of 10. I'm sure I'm triggering a lot of you people. Look, but listen, before you type any angry comments being like, "Trish is the best female character we've ever had in JoJo." You know, I'm not saying Trish is bad looking. I'm just saying, you know, she's not the best. This is a very part 4 nose, if you know what I mean. Like, this is the art style that they attempted with early part 4, and they never got right, ever. It just always kind of looked wrong. And here again, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel Araki in some way. I think it's just like the way this nose is extra spiky, or maybe I'm just being a bit too discerning. And I mean, like, I recognize the aesthetic that they're trying to do, because Araki does draw noses like this, right? Like, this is his aesthetic. Like, this is almost exactly what he does for many of his noses throughout part 6, through early part 7, and indeed through part 5. When I see this nose, I think of Abakio. Like, if I just block out every other part of her face, I actually kind of just think Abakio. Like, this is Abakio to me. But just something about the way it's drawn in the anime, it just doesn't feel right. They tried using this aesthetic in the early parts of the part 4 anime, and it just didn't glue together very well. And here it is again, and I still don't think it's gluing together very well. The noses are such a weird part of JoJo. Like, they're the most unique parts, I think. There are anime with thick-ass lips like this one, right? But there's, like, no recognizable anime with noses as thick as these, and just, like, as protrusive as these. Oh, let's get rid of the nose. This shadow, I think, is a little bit odd. This actually looks a lot like Gon from Hunter x Hunter. How do you think Polpo uses this toilet? Surely he doesn't sit on it. Do you think he just, like, aims? Oh god, and then we get Polpo's voice, and I really think they butchered Polpo's voice. Like, Polpo shouldn't be this kind of ethereal entity. I don't know if he's speaking through the mic, and so, you know, it just sounds weird because of that, but they don't really show, like, a speaker or a mic at all, so why does he have this weird voice? He's not like a superhuman entity, he just is a guy. And so to give him this weird effect where he's got like 2 voices layered on top of one another. In fact, I know exactly how to do that. It's basically you take the original voice, you pitch it down quite a significant amount, and then you put it on top of the original recording, and you get this exact effect. And it's just odd that they had to do this, because I think it's actually more creepy for Polpo to just be like this regular fat ass who just behaves in this really odd manner than some kind of like superhuman entity. Like, it's just weird. I can't really reason why they gave Polpo such a weird voice other than they wanted to make him creepy, but that's exactly what doesn't make him creepy. Like, the fact that he is this mammoth of a character and he'll eat his own fingers just trying to nom on some crackers. but he otherwise is just this regular human. That is what makes him creepy. And so to give him this super hammed up voice and to caricature his presence is, I think, actually shooting themselves in the foot in terms of making Polpo this really interesting character. Also, there's this incredibly cartoony reveal that totally isn't Horace Slughorn. This is, I don't know, like Scooby-Doo or some shit. Like, it's just not satisfying to watch at all. I would have preferred if I can go back a frame. No, I can't because I'm in Crunchyroll. Frame by... I wonder if... Does Crunchyroll have, like, frame by frame? Whatever. Anyway, the point is, I would have preferred if, like, his arm had suddenly, like, rolled out from under the bed. And I'm just kind of confused about whether he's under the bed or if he's part of the bed. But instead, they have this goofy-ass digital manipulation thing. And it's not satisfying. I didn't find it satisfying at any rate. I wonder what you guys thought of it. Thanks, Miss Captain Obvious. Yes. They do this more later, and I'll talk about it more then. And so yeah, like, he's this massive entity that Giorno is clearly, like, sweating and freaking out over. You don't have to make him less human by giving him this, like, goofy voice. Not like not like the Disney character Goofy, but just it is a unrealistic voice. It sounds like Lelouch's mask. And actually, it sounds a lot like Lelouch's voice actor. That moment I always thought was weird. Like, why is Polpo suddenly like a Sherlock Holmes figure now? Like, is there really any necessity for that? I guess that's just showing that he's smart and he's got big brains, right? But like, there's no specific justification for why that's necessary, because Giorno actually outsmarts him, and we'll see this in the next episode with the gun and the banana incident, which that'll be a lot of fun to watch. I wonder if Polpo actually knows how to play the violin, or if he cares for that teddy at all. What a weird collection of items. And who does he play ball with? I guess he just throws it against the wall. Question mark. Also, that's like, this is literally the definition of Chekhov's gun. You show a gun, has to be fired by the next chapter. And indeed, we will definitely see this gun being fired next episode. So Bucciarati's already told him everything about Giorno. When we saw that Bruno and Giorno were having this conversation of Giorno wanting to join the gang, immediately Bruno says, well, you should come talk to this guy called Polpo, who'll let you join the gang after you pass the test. So are we to assume that Giorno and Bucciarati haven't actually talked for like a day or so? Or are we still to believe that this is the same day that Giorno tried to steal Koichi's luggage? Koichi chased him, he then met Leaky Eye Luca, he killed Leaky Eye Luca, Bruno tracked him down, and then the conversation happened, and immediately after that, still on the same day, Giorno went to talk to Polpo. Which timeline are we currently following? I think the more realistic one is the first one, where there's a lot of time that we don't get to see, but I actually prefer the second one, where it's all just like one massive long day for Giorno, who must be like freaking tired at the end of it. Just because there's a sense of intensity that none of the other parts really get. Like, think about the first day of part 1 or part 3 or part 4 even. Like, nothing really happens. It's more just like, here's a bunch of characters that you'll get to know, and they just kind of do stuff, and one of them kicks a dog, but that's okay. And then time passes and slowly stuff happens to them. Whereas, you know, you look at part 2, the same day that Jojo meets Smokey, they go to the restaurant, where then they hear about Speedwagon's assumed death, and then he meets Straits, and then they have the fight, and eventually, like, Straits dies on the same day that Jojo buys Coca-Cola from that one street merchant and Smokey steals his wallet, right? So, like, there's that intensity, and it's really carrying forward the momentum of the work. And here with Giorno, by the time we get to Sunset, we get to see Black Sabbath coming out, and we've already had 2 stand fights within the same day for Jojo, and you know, that's the kind of intensity that I'm talking about. And by the next day, you know, Polpo dies, Giorno gets introduced into the gang, and we're already on our way to Capri. So like, there's this super intensity in terms of the macro pacing of the text, right? Like, there's no time for in-between space, and I really like that idea. But then if we are to assume that second part, where Bruno was literally having the conversation with Giorno outside the prison, where he was like, yeah, Polpo's inside there, just go and talk to him. When exactly did Bucciarati stop talking to Giorno and then come and meet Polpo and then tell Polpo all about Giorno? Like, when did this happen? And so I'm really kind of fascinated by the idea that Bruno actually just like zipped underground and then tunneled all the way under, and then made like a little zipper down here, and he said, hey, there's a little blonde kid coming around who yeah, he wants to join the gang. I met him while searching for Leaky Eye Luca, and yeah, you know, Leaky Eye Luca just like committed suicide or something, I'm not really sure. Bye. Right? Like, there's that possibility. And to think that just while Giorno was being body checked just down the corridor there, Bruno was actually just here and having like a little chat with Polpo. Like, that's a really cool idea, I think. Anyway, I've scribbled all over this page. So let's wipe all that and then let's continue on. And then this finger eating scene, I really don't think they did justice. Like, there's never a clear moment where it's like, oh my god, did he just bite his fingers off? They make it look like he's just kind of chewing on his fingers, and then you get like this, obviously it's censored, so that ruins the effect. But also they don't really draw attention to it, and so it's not as satisfying as it could have been, in my opinion. And you never really get a good grasp of what's happening. And then immediately cuts away to Giorno, who doesn't like act surprised or anything. It's just a single panel of him being like, what? And he turns very slowly at the cuckoo clock as well. Like, he's not shocked by it, he's not alarmed by it, he doesn't turn very suddenly to be like, oh my god, I just saw something scary and now other creepy noises are being made. It's just kind of like, oh yes, that happened. Like, immediately we should be cutting into, and we do get a shot of this, right? But the shot that we get next should have been the shot that we cut back to, instead of this general shot where, you know, the focus again isn't on the hand or even the fingers at all. It's just on Polpo drinking wine, and so you confuse that action even further. I think my general discontent with this episode is that it just didn't provide satisfying moments that otherwise could have been very interesting and engaging parts of, you know, watching this particular interaction between Giorno and Polpo. And it, like I was talking about last episode, you know, when Bruno has to explain why Giorno's stand rush didn't actually hurt him in any way. Here, when Giorno's explaining why he's shocked, you never really feel Giorno's shock, and it's never that apparent to you why Giorno is behaving in this suddenly very stressed manner where he's sweating even more. And so when he says it looked like he took a bite out of his finger, it's more of like an, oh, that's what happened, instead of like, yeah, what the heck is going on? This is bizarre, right? Like, you don't get that feeling, and it's a shame. I feel like this should have been such a personal conversation, you know, Polpo just being like, you know, Giorno, what do you think it's most important when it comes to trusting someone? But instead, like, it's this incredibly hammed up voice actor with this obnoxious vocal effect. So I'll actually approximate how this would sound in English, right? What do you think is the most important thing when it comes to choosing someone? Giorno, Giovanna? And it's like, oh god, just speak normally, because this is like this is a very personal conversation between the two of them. Polpo is trying to gauge whether Giorno is worth trusting. Giorno is trying to deceive him without Polpo knowing that he's being deceived, and so this is like a very dangerous character for Giorno to be deceiving, because it's not like either you get away with it or you don't, and it's just kind of like a game where Giorno is let off, right? Like, this is, you're deceiving a gang that will undoubtedly be out to kill you if they find out that you've been trying to get into the gang by deceiving one of its leaders, one of its capos. And so this should be like a much more subdued and well, personal interaction between the two of them, where it's more of a battle of wits, but instead it's like this extremely, I guess obnoxious would be like the most appropriate word for it. Like, it's overly over the top. And like, that's the worst place, as I said in episode 1, it's the worst place for Jojo to be, because Jojo inherently is over the top. Look at this fucking fat ass, right? Like, this is not someone that you want to mess around with. You don't need to make that obvious to us by giving him this creepy voice and, you know, having him ham up his voice acting so he's very obviously evil. If you play it the other way, if you play the trope the other way, then it actually enhances both parts of that, and that contrast, that juxtaposition emphasizes both parts of it and makes him a more interesting character, which the manga did well, and the anime is failing to do. So, like it's the same word, it's not satisfying. One of the reasons why I said I didn't have much to say about this episode was because I didn't want to complain about it as much as I have. So I kind of regret that I've just gone like full salty mode at the moment. But on the other hand, you know, I feel like this is the kind of stuff that you guys just subscribe to. If you're not getting hour-long videos about me ranting about what I love and what I dislike about the Vento Aureo anime, then then unsubscribe, because it's not the quality content that you expect from Dark Ocean. Anyway, I won't even talk about what I don't like about that. The music here is really nice though. This is the same theme that we heard in the previews, right? But it's played like really slowly and like staccato on like a cello, and it sounds pretty good. I don't know how well you guys will hear it, but if you go back and watch the episode, then certainly you'll hear a much better rendition of it than what you probably hear in this video under my voice. And I like that Giorno actually just like does it here. He's just like, yep, and this is something I can do, by the way. Imagine a job interview, like a legit one, not just like you joining a gang, where you actually just said to the people interviewing you, by the way, I have this really cool skill. I can stuff my ear into its hole. I can't imagine someone actively being excited about employing you after learning about that little fact. And of course, that's the same animation from episode 1, but just like mirrored. I don't blame them, because it is a brilliant animation. God, like, see what I mean by not being subtle? Like, he's already this massive face. Like, his face is twice the size of Giorno's torso, right? And he's like leaned right up against the glass. You don't have to be like, it's just not. So that's a really cool test. There's God, there's like an actual thing, isn't there? I'm gonna Google this, hang on. Man, I can't find it, but I know there's something in the Bible about like not letting the flame go out, but there's also like this very specific movie about, God, it was like walking from one point to another without letting the flame go out, and every time the flame went out, you had to start over from the very beginning. I'm not sure like where I even know that from, but like I just know that I know it, and so it's really kind of like making me scratch my head going, where did I even get this knowledge from? But I wonder if Araki's either referencing the movie or referencing like the thing from the Bible that I mentioned, which I also have no real recognition or understanding of. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any like real intuition about where Araki might have gotten this idea about the flame going out and not letting the flame go out, then I'd really be interested. I recognize it, but it's kind of like a false recognition, where I understand the intent and I understand what it looks like, but I don't really understand where it comes from and what it's trying to reference, if anything. But in any case, it's a very interesting idea of not letting the flame go out as a means of showing trust. To go back to talking about morality, and especially morality within the gang, and in fact, this is kind of a callback to Liki Luca as well. Liki Luca, if you'll remember, was actually talking about the 3 U's of friendship, right? And it's like, you don't lie to the other person or stuff like that. I have to go back and rewatch it to actually verify what he's saying. And you know, that's all stuff that I'll be talking about in the specific video I'll make about Bruno's morality. When you're in a gang, you have to abide by its own laws, right? Like the general laws of the state no longer matter when you're in a closer and more powerful society, as it would be in Italy. But in this case, the morality of the gang is to do your duty, right? Even if it's completely impossible, you have to do the task that's allotted to you. And if Giorno can't abide by that law, then not only is he unfit to be a gangster, but he's also, in a way, unfit to live, as Black Sabbath decides in Polpo's stead. That's a really good bit of animation where he like turns his head without moving his gaze off of the lighter, and then he fully turns away from it, and that's a very realistic motion. See, and it's interesting that Polpo like blatantly lies there, because the test is revealed to be not whether you let the lighter go out or not, but rather will you be able to stay alive after the stand arrow pierces your soul. And so there's kind of 2 tests going on here. One is dedication to your duty, and the second is the quality of your soul. Even if you fail the physical task of the flame staying alive, once you reignite it, it tests not your physical state anymore, your conscious self, but instead the stand. And that's the representation of your unconscious. The soul, but not being repressed by your conscious self and your physical body, if that makes sense. Like, it is all of your desires and all of your passions brought to life very literally. And if that doesn't have the dedication and the drive required to become a member of Passione, then you die. Like, that's the real test, in my opinion. First, it tests you on the physical level and the conscious level, whether you have the determination. And if you fail on that level, not only when you fail it, but when you reignite the fire, so you still want to be, right? So the test inherently assumes that you still want to be successful. And so in order to fully evaluate you on that, in order to say, well, you're not just a coward who's afraid of taking this lighter back to Polpo and saying, listen, I failed, it tests you on the drive and determination of your soul instead. I love this little moment where he's like, oh my god, what? But yeah, no, like this little moment where Giorno like freaks out for a little bit, and then they're all like, what are you talking about? Ah, brilliant. Brilliant way to build attention. Love Giorno's pose there. See, like, so far we've only really seen a Giorno who's very calm in the face of conflict. And he immediately knows what to do. But here we see a Giorno who's like, oh shit, I messed up. Right? So we finally get Giorno from Giorno's perspective, whereas before we had him in Koichi's perspective, and then in Bruno's perspective, right? Very rarely did we actually get to hear Giorno's point of view. So this is the first point where we rationally see things from Giorno's point of view, where Giorno is faced with a conflict where we know the stakes, and we're just waiting to see how Giorno thinks his way out of it. And so this is the first time we really see Giorno as a protagonist, I'd argue. Interesting pose. And I kind of detest how his face is very obviously badly drawn here. Kind of looks like Okuyasu from part 4 actually. And then it zooms in and it's like this beautifully detailed close-up. With these backgrounds as well. Okay, so before I was talking about how Giorno was Captain Obvious, and here I really don't think they needed to use this dubbing at all. Like, it's just so obvious that, like, yes, obviously you're gonna hide it in your hand the way you hid her ID. Like, do they even mention that in the manga? I feel like they don't, because Araki, you know, by the time you get to part 5, like, he's not doing this kind of stuff where he's explaining every little thing. And I don't remember Giorno ever being this vocal about the stuff he's doing, because it just made sense. Like, obviously he's gonna hide it in his hand. What else is he gonna do? Like, show it to them? Like, come on. In any case, like, all of this just explains it all anyway, so why are you dubbing it over if you're already showing us with rather, you know, beautiful animation as well? Probably some of the best in probably some of the best in the episode. Exactly what he's doing. It's kind of silly and redundant. And she looks beautiful. She really does. Better than Trish. Come on, guys. You know it's true. Beautiful. I love that you can hear like little whisperings of Giorno's stand effect there. Really cool. Tadashi! Wonderful animation. Like, just the way the action is weighted in that certain way, and it perfectly matches their tone of voice. They put a lot of work into this short little cut that honestly probably should have gone into like some of the longer cuts, like the quality drops with regards to Giorno's face. Like, that's honestly such a brilliant little touch of animation. In fact, I think this second part of this episode looks a lot better than the first half, so I don't know if they're just like balancing their budget a bit better there, or if they just had a better artist working on this stuff, or they knew that the second half would be more important narrative-wise than the first half, so they're willing to redistribute talent to better reflect that. Like here, for example, they're actually willing to show the flower turning into the lighter. And it's a relatively simple animation. Like, it's just kind of like smush the lines together and then redraw it into the shape that you originally wanted. Like, it's a pretty simple animation, but it's still done very smoothly. Whereas what did we get in the first half of the episode? Just like the wallet and all the notes just kind of popping out of thin air under Giorno's arm. And it's like, is that the quality that we want? No. And also, here we are again with Captain Obvious being very explicit about all the stuff he does. I turned the lighter into a flower and hid the flame within it. Yes, we just saw you doing that. Why are you explaining this? I love that Giorno is like super high resolution. And they obviously just scaled him down because that looks way too good for the quality that you usually get with drawings of this scale. Also, this palm tree is the same as this palm tree. Like, see, this is the quality that you would usually get from distant shots. Again, you know, like, yes, we noticed that the wind is obviously bad for flame. Everyone knows this, Giorno. Stop saying obvious shit. Here, finally, the black eyes actually look good. And again, I'm not sure what exactly the stylistic thing is that makes it look good here, but horrible in other places. But it does look good here. Isn't that guy meant to be colored as Mario? He's got like red overalls with like a blue shirt or something. It's your boy, Koichi Hirose! And he looks really good there. Again, with the animation. I mentioned this in episode 1 as well, but even though he's really only like sliding into view and he's not actually doing anything, I still think this is really good animation because it gets the point across very, very well. And I'd rather this... it sounds weird, but I'd rather this level of art style with minimalistic animation than like even the tiniest little bit of animation and a significant drop in art style quality. Like this, for example, is like the antithesis to that. I keep pronouncing that antithesis, which I think is the better pronunciation actually. Screw it actually, I like antithesis better. This is the antithesis to exactly what I was talking about. Low quality art style, but you know, relatively high quality animation where he's actually like looking around and he's moving around the room. This is pretty cool. Giorno being Italian actually puts Koichi's first name first and last name last, instead of if you go back to, for example, Koichi's introduction in part 4, he says his name is Hirose Koichi, because that's the way the Japanese introduce themselves, last name first, first name second. This is a particularly good shot, I think. Like just the very claustrophobic way this is framed. It's kind of like we're seeing this from Giorno's perspective actually, because he's very much like hiding and very hemmed in by his situation, and similarly, you know, we're also like being squished into this narrow field of view, and we can barely see anything, and all we see is Koichi because he's the most immediate and significant threat, and so that, you know, it's actually a very nice shot, I think. So yeah, Koichi, despite looking pretty terrible, is actually still like moving around the room. So it's not like this doesn't have its own meaningful addition to what the anime is trying to convey, because, you know, you really get a feeling of how much Koichi is insistent upon finding his stuff, right? Like he'll look everywhere and he's very dynamic about it, and he's not just like statically standing in one place, especially given the context of the fact that there is a lighter here that we don't want to let out. It makes Koichi's dynamicism and how much he's moving around in the room make us worry about obviously like turbulence and stuff, and whether that's disrupted the candle, the lighter in any way. So, you know, this in its own way is good, but I would still prefer, for the general case, I would actually still prefer the other. I love this cheeky little reveal that Giorno did actually plan to return some of his stuff, despite stealing most of his money and most of his belongings as well. Like, oh yeah, just the passport I have literally no use for, so hey, you can take that back, because, you know, that's something that all travelers need, right? Like, screw the money and screw your clothes and all of that, but passport, yeah, totally the thing that I should return to you. This is a beautiful sequence though, use of CG, I think. And again, that really smooth transition to show Giorno giving life to objects is a marked improvement over basically anything we've seen in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure with regards to how stand powers are implemented, so really no complaints there. And like, look at how smooth and beautiful this snake is, like just all of its movements feel so weighty and awesome. So, to be honest, I actually think the reason why the first half of the show looked pretty bad is because of this snake. In fact, can you guys see that? Look at that beautiful S shape right there. But no, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because of the snake, because of how much weight they're giving this movement, and how realistic they make it act. Realistically, they make it act. And see, like little stuff, like the way its eyes opened when it was burned and then it just like jerked around very rapidly. You really get a sense that this snake is real and it's not just like some animated construct. Both literally in that it is animated and animated as in it was given life by Giorno's stand. How exactly do you guys think Giorno got that lighter out? Do you think he created another animal, or do you think he just plucked it out using gold experience and then ran the fuck away? Here's another example coming up of the transition that I was talking about. Here, flat colors with gradients, obviously done digitally, and then you can see even right now actually there's just the tiniest little bit of light that then spreads out across his entire body. You know what this just made me really hyped for, and you heard me being really hyped for as I was talking about it. There's this brilliant frame at the end of White Album. You guys might know what I'm talking about. In fact, it's like an entire page pretty much, where the sun comes out behind Giorno and Mista, and Mista has like almost died to his own bullets. And Giorno just catches him as he falls, and he's like, I have seen your golden spirit. And he heals Mista. But just as all this heroic stuff is going down, the sun rises behind the two of them, and they're illuminated in this golden glow. It looks so, oh my god, the color scans especially are sublime. And if they're gonna do that, if they're gonna do this for that particular scene, that's gonna be a real highlight. That's something that I'm actually really excited for now, and I just thought about it, and yeah, you heard me and take my breath there, and that's really no exaggeration, because my god, that's gonna look brilliant. Oh, it's gonna look so good. And this looks brilliant. So again, this is what I was talking about. The coward would here, having failed his task, would have been maybe too afraid to go back to Polpo, or would have asked for a second try and been like, hey, I let you down, but I promise I won't do that again next time. And it depends on how much you've talked with people, but most of the time, if someone lets you down once, they'll let you down continuously. There's very few people who, being given a second chance, would actually take advantage of it and wouldn't make the same mistakes that they made last time, and wouldn't let people down the same way. And Polpo, obviously recognizes this, which is why he's willing to give this task specifically, where even considering this action as a viable method of getting out of this situation where the lighter has gone out, is an automatic failure. So what does someone with determination and resolve immediately do? Well, they light it up again, obviously. And that's where the real test happens, and that's where the worth of your soul itself is determined. And it's not just your actions or how well you can commit to them physically, but also whether your soul could even handle that level of responsibility, which is why stands, being a representation of souls, figure into this fight specifically so much. In my opinion. I love that you can actually hear a little bit of gas. Like the little hissing of gas in the background. And then they make it louder here, obviously, but it's still like actually going. And so that's pretty interesting. Little sound direction choice. Did you guys notice the color change, the lighting change as we descend into sunset? I'm actually really fascinated by this entire fight, and especially this moment right here. It's actually kind of interesting that they are immediately playing with shadows, which is of course a big part of the Black Sabbath fight. But more than that, just this explosion of flame, you never really know whether it's because of all the gas that's accumulated from, it constantly releasing gas, or whether it's actually like some sign that Black Sabbath has been released, right? And so now it's found itself in like the shadows or whatever. I don't really know. Like there's no indication of which one specifically created this giant burst of gas. I like to think it's the release of Black Sabbath, but realistically it's probably all the gas that's building up. But in any case, it's a really good indication that even though, yes, you can continue with the test, ? Something has clearly gone topsy-turvy, right? Like things are not the way that they previously were with the test. Like something has changed. Something has changed in a really significant way. And of course, like I've been harping on about for this whole episode, of course things have changed. We've gone from, the purely physical test of maintaining this lighter to the metaphysical test of, are you a meaningfully righteous and dignified person who's dedicated enough to continue with the test and succeed with the test even after, having failed it. And so the stand comes out, and it comes out with a stand arrow. The stand arrow chooses souls that have that meritable quality, let's say. And this is kind of like the trigger point that says, hey, you are no longer in the realm that you previously understood. Things have changed drastically. This is the symbol for it. This is Arki's visual language to show something has gone askew. And the cool thing about the anime is, well, they have access to color, so they actually go pretty crazy with it, and they even change the coloring of the sky entirely to sunsets, which the fight actually canonically takes place during. See, so like, it's kind of interesting that the janitor who has no stand and has no real like intuition for this other world, like the spiritual world, the metaphysical world, is immediately like, yeah, everything's okay. Like, that's the first line he says. But then we get to Giorno, who does indeed have a stand and does have a connection to his soul that you couldn't possibly say is regular at all. He can summon his soul at will, and he can summon this manifestation of his desires and of his fighting spirit, let's say, his worldview and his past experiences. He does have a very profound connection to that in having a stand, and he immediately knows something's wrong. So again, this entire Black Sabbath fight, I think, is playing on the physical divide between Giorno, the person, and Gold Experience, the soul, right? That divide between the conscious and its physical actions versus the unconscious and its desires and its drives and its need to see this light sustain. The part of Giorno's determination and drive that doesn't give up and doesn't think rationally about why this lighter may possibly be able to be relit. Does that make sense? The more I talk about this, the more I'm like, maybe I don't make any sense at all. Tell me what you guys think. But I really think like there's a strong point to be made. And I guess the other thing also is that Black Sabbath literally moves in shadows. So it's a stand which, by definition, well, I shouldn't say that. Most stands aren't physical to begin with, right? Like they're ethereal. They have no physical presence. But Black Sabbath specifically actually dissolves into the shadows. So it doesn't even have like that basic physical presence that other stands do. Like, it's an ethereal form that hides into even greater ethereal form. It's like meta-ethereal, if you will. Like, it's so beyond the physical that at some point it's even hard to define what it actually is. I mean, we get the idea later on in this fight that Polpo doesn't even control this stand. Like, it has nothing to do with Polpo whatsoever. We don't even know if Polpo actually has the stand, right? I mean, obviously, Polpo knows that he's got a stand. It's implicit, but he never truly acknowledges it, and it's never really made explicit. And so, again, that's a really interesting divide. A stand user who's at such a great distance from his ethereal self and his and the projection of his soul that they're almost separate entities, right? This is the stand that is willing to test Giorno, as I've said like 4 or 5 times, both physically, in terms of the lighter's flame, and mentally now, as we see when Black Sabbath finally appears in its stand form and pulls the souls out of people and stabs them with the stand arrow. So yeah, the arrow comes out and it's still got a hole. So yeah, I mean, I don't really know what I expected, to be honest. David Production obviously being loyal to JoJo as usual, especially with visual designs, I think the one visual design that they've actually screwed up really badly has been Killer Queen, and even that they changed back to like how it looked in the manga. So here I wanted to talk briefly about, the idea of what it is to be chosen. I'm not going to repeat everything I've said like 4 or 5 times already, but as I've been saying, this is the second test in my opinion. What the arrow is looking for is people with a strong desire to succeed, a strong fighting spirit, whatever you want to call it. It's the idea that you're not going to give up just because, like you failed on a physical level. You still haven't failed on a mental level. And it's those people who are still willing to challenge Polpo's rules. There you go. I feel like I finally gotten a grasp of what I'm trying to say. Like only those who are willing to challenge Polpo's rules, and they're willing to say, screw it, I've let the lighter die, but I'm going to deceive Polpo, I'm going to lie, and I'm gonna keep trucking on with this challenge just to get into this gang. You know, only people with that level of determination and drive are the ones who can be chosen by the arrow, because they're the only ones with souls strong enough to manifest a stand. In a way, Polpo's test is actually really intelligent, because the people who come back 24 hours later and the flame has never gone out, it's like, okay, you're obviously reliable, why would we turn you down? But then the people who fail that test are tested a second time to see whether their heart is really in it and whether they really truly want to become a gangster, or if they're just posturing. And if they're just posturing, then they face the same fate as this man, where they don't have the will strong enough to survive being stabbed by the stand arrow. Whereas people like Narancia, for instance, we don't really know how he got his stand, but maybe Narancia was indeed stabbed by the stand arrow and manifested a stand because they had that resolve and they said, it doesn't matter what I take, I will satisfy my promise to Polpo, even if it means lying through my teeth and telling him, yeah, I did totally keep that flame alive for 24 hours even when I didn't. And yeah, despite having my soul stabbed by a stand arrow, I still had the mental fortitude to say, doesn't matter, this just makes me stronger. Alright, that's the last time I'll talk about that, I promise. And I mean that for like future episodes as well. When we get to the proper Black Sabbath fights next week, I promise I won't say a word of any of this stuff. As interesting as it is, it's kind of painful actually. He did. I kind of regret saying all the stuff that I said, because now I want to say, look, it's the divide between the physical and the soul again. He wasn't hurt, but his soul totally was stabbed through the head, and that's the divide again. Whoa! This is a really good visual representation of how exactly Black Sabbath works, but there's actually a lot of panels in the manga that lead up to this point, and they never really truly explain what Black Sabbath is about for like a really very long time. And that's something I actually like about the manga. Like, it hints and it hints and it hints, and there's so many little hints about how Black Sabbath works and the way it actually manifested that didn't make it into the anime. And on one level, obviously I'm disappointed, because I do think there's a lot to Araki's artwork in that particular fight. But on the other hand, I am actually thinking of doing a series that analyzes stand fights, specifically in Vento Aureo and Steel Ball Run, which have my favorite fights. Just talking about the visual language that Araki uses and how he uses paneling and how he introduces his characters and all this other stuff, and the fact that the Vento Aureo anime doesn't use the traits that I'm talking about actually makes me pretty excited that now I can talk about them. And I can elucidate what I think is really stellar about Araki's artwork in those fights. And it will be a really new perspective that even the anime never really got to embrace. And that actually gets me really hyped now to talk about that stuff in like a separate series. But of course that will be like, I wouldn't say years, but months down the line when I finally have the free time to engage with this kind of material. I think now the voice makes sense. Polpo's voice makes sense. But back in the jail cell, I think it was just overly hammed up. But for a stand, like, it really sounds nice. It's metallic and it's not particularly hammy, because I mean, look at him. He looks like Frollo, who's already like the definition of ham. If you've seen Hunchback of Notre Dame, you know, like, he's got the same hat and he's got like this giant flowing robe thing, and you know, it just has like this natural dramatic flair that lends him to projecting his voice and sounding really grandiose, right? And so it's really natural here, but for Polpo, no, absolutely not. Like, that looks so good. But it just was very much unnatural back in the jail cell, and here it's actually natural instead. God, I love Black Sabbath's design. Look at the feet, man. Look at the feet. Brilliant. So the last time I got copyright struck was for this ending theme, so I'm not actually going to play that. In the background, though, I will give you some freeze frames. You can actually see some little stuff, like here's the stand arrow that you can see in the background. And if you continue a little bit further on, you'll actually see that, you'll actually see the lighter right there. They're adding little stuff that updates the ending as we go, and I'm curious how much of it will be as like hidden as this is, for example. Like, you probably can barely see that, especially the way the screen is right now. You probably won't be able to see that at all, but there is like a lighter just kind of glowing in the screens behind them, and that's really interesting to see. And I wonder whether I've already missed some of the changes, because those were only the two biggest ones that I saw, and maybe there's more that I've just not noticed at all. if this ending theme does happen to go for all 39 episodes, as it did with Diamond is Unbreakable, then I can really see this background getting super crazy and super interesting to see all the little changes. You know, like Giorno's little ladybug brooch that he gives to Bucciarati when Bucciarati ascends with Trish the belfry at San Giorgio Maggiore. Little stuff like that. I'm pretty sure they'll build it up and it'll be really exciting to see. Oh, and to the turtle, obviously, Coco Jumbo, yeah, Coco Jumbo, yeah. It'll be really interesting to see when and where that comes up in either the ending or the opening, because I feel like Coco Jumbo is a part of the team. He just doesn't get enough of a shout out in stuff like this, where you know you get the Vento Aureo squad. Like they're willing to keep Trish, but they're not willing to keep Coco Jumbo. Come on, man, give Mr. President some screen time, baby. Come on, he deserves it. He is the one and only turtle. In fact, are there other turtles in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Oh yes, there are. In part 4, there's that one turtle that Josuke is scared of in like the very first chapter of part 4. It's such a weird moment, but there is that turtle, and I think no other turtle at all ever. But yeah, next episode we've got episode 4, which is joining the gang. Gyanga something Japanese, and then there's Italian up here, so it's all just like a crazy mess. But of course, that's very much JoJo in a nutshell. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Obviously, I went kind of on the deep end ranting about the divide between the physical and the spiritual with regards to the stand and the stand user. But I feel like that's most relevant with not only the Black Sabbath fight, but also with part 5 in general, right? With body swapping and all this other stuff that comes up later in the work. There's no better opportunity to talk about that than here and right now, so let's indulge ourselves, you know? But yeah, no, with all that said, I really hope you guys enjoy. We are in this for the long haul, so to speak. I'm doing this for 39 straight weeks, and that's gonna be pretty taxing both for you and for me. What else can I say? I love reading your guys' comments, so please feel free to leave more. And if you did watch all the way through, you are an absolute legend, because I can already tell just from how dead my voice is getting that I've talked for way too much again. And hopefully I can keep it to under an hour this time, but I don't know, no promises there. The further we get into the series, viewership will go down, and obviously as viewership goes down, the number of likes going into the video will go down as well. So if you're like if you're really enjoying these, you know, almost frame by frame analyses, certainly like scene by scene analyses of each of these episodes that are taking like, you know, well over an hour to watch, then certainly a like would mean a lot. As I said, leave a comment, because I read all of those, and they're all very fascinating, and they're all very rewarding to read as well. When you talk about JoJo for hours at a time, there's always this fear that no one really cares about what you think. And so to actually see that people are watching these videos in their entirety and, you know, responding and reacting to every little thing and providing their own thoughts, it's really very, very satisfying. So keep doing that if you've been doing it. I love it if you started from this particular episode, if this is just where you happen to be. I hope that you've got stuff to add to all the stuff I've said. Maybe you disagree vehemently with some of the stuff I've said. Maybe you think I'm just talking a lot of bollocks when I talk about the divide between the self and the conscious self and the unconscious self, represented by the stand user and the stand respectively. You know, all this stuff. There's so much to talk about and not enough time to talk about it as much, you know, like all the hours that I talk about, you know, this one episode. So yeah, I really hope the conversation continues. And in fact, if I get enough comments, then I'll probably start up like a Q&A sort of thing, where every 3 or 4 episodes, I'll just dig into the comments and really give them a lot of detail and answer them to a degree and a depth that interacting by text in the comment section wouldn't really permit. So yeah, just go crazy in the comments. It doesn't matter how long, it doesn't matter what you think. I'd still love to hear your thoughts, and share the video with other JoJo fanatics who you think would enjoy like this really, how can I say this, narrow analysis, let's say, like a close reading essentially of every episode of Giorno's Adventure. I'm sure, you know, some people would be thrilled to know that something like this exists, whereas other people would probably be repulsed, right? Like they'd be like, why would anyone talk for like hours at a time about one particular episode of JoJo? Like it's just an anime. No, it's not just an anime, you plebeian. All right, I think that's enough talking. I really think I'm running my tongue here, so I'll just stop talking, shall I?